Welcome back to the workshop, guys. In the last video we put out on tips and tricks in armor, we looked at how to take original source material and images and then come up with a design that we can then apply and make real armor here in the workshop. But how do you actually go about making the armor? One of the big questions I always get asked whenever I'm at events or meet people in person is, how do you start with steel and end up with the shiny, beautiful, magical thing that we all know as armor? And the answer to that question is in this video, guys, with the skill known as raising. Raising is the cornerstone or primary technique that we use to sculpt steel in medieval armoring. It allows us to take what is essentially a rigid and unformable medium and put complex and beautiful shape into that steel. Raising involves driving waves, known as passes, across the piece of armor. Each wave creates a step, and when chased out, creates the depth and shape in the piece of armor we're trying to create. In the case of the manifold, what we're trying to do is essentially taper what is a tube into an hourglass type shape. To do this, we're going to start by raising from the cuff to the wrist, and then from the metacarpal here at the front to the wrist also. This will create the desired depth and shape that we're looking for. As we work from the outside towards the wrist, we are maintaining the thickness of the steel around the deepest part of our gauntlet. In fact, this is precisely why we work from the outside in, since if we were to work from the inside out, the opposite way, we would be thinning the material by stretching it around the wrist of the gauntlet. And this is the exact opposite of what we want in good medieval armor. In fact, this is why raising is the primary and preferred method of forming steel, both in history and today, since it enables us to both maintain thickness and in some cases control the thickness of steel while creating the shape in the piece that we're working on. So how is it that we can actually go about raising? Well, to create the waves that we were just talking about, we drive the material down onto a stake. In this case, we're using a T-stake, and you can use other kinds of stakes like mushroom stakes or ball stakes, but we find that the T-stake is the most useful here in the workshop. It's the most versatile, and it allows you to get a good amount of depth inside of the piece that you're working. You can actually see us making this exact T-stake in another video here on the channel if you guys are interested in making one of your own. Using chalk, we draw up a bit of a guide on the gauntlet to maintain consistency and guide our eye as we start to put shape into the gauntlet. What it also helps us to do is to maintain symmetry and gives us a reference point for our greatest depth or where we're wanting our passes to end. Heating up the material, we bring it over to the T-stake and brace it against the end. We then raise it at a slight angle, which creates a gap above the working surface and underneath that red hot steel. We then take our crosspeen or raising hammer and drive the red hot steel to the stake, creating the first step or line, which we then chase around the piece, and this becomes the pass or wave, which will run to the end point on our gauntlet. The hammer that we're actually using on our gauntlet build here is made by Hammer and Scales. They were generous enough to send us this hammer to test out here in the workshop, and I have to say, it's performing brilliantly. Go check out Rob Hayes' work at Hammer and Scales. He does the most amazing armor and weapons based here in Australia and makes these armoring hammers, which are pretty rare and hard to come by. So check him out on Instagram, and thanks so much for the hammer. We'll put it to good use. It's important to note in raising that we're not forging the steel against the T-stake. That is, we're not excessively hammering it between the hammer surface and the T-stake that we're working against. This creates thinning in the piece, which in the worst case can end up becoming holes and burn-throughs, which is completely horrible for our goal of making medieval armor. Nor do we simply hammer into the void, which also stretches the material, thinning it out. Instead, what we do is drive the material to the stake, impacting it once with each strike. This drives material in front and behind the hammer, filling in the material stretched by the previous pass and driving material ahead for the next pass. In a nutshell, raising enables us to maintain the thickness of that steel, no matter how deep we take it or how many passes we have to run. Essentially what we're doing is sculpting what we envision from an original source into the steel.